A poor girl enters a church to shelter from the cold. She sees a billionaire looking at a photo and asks, "How do you know my mother?" He freezes, his eyes fill with tears, and he says, "It can't be. You're her daughter." The biting wind pushed Sadi into the church. Her fingers, red from the cold, could barely hold the hem of a coat far too thin for the autumn night. At 5 years old, she already knew well what it meant to fend for herself. The heavy wooden door creaked as she pushed it, letting a bit of warmth escape from inside. Sadi hesitated at the entrance. The church was nearly empty, except for a few lit candles on the altar and a man sitting in the last pew. It didn't seem like a dangerous place, and it was warm. She slipped inside, trying not to make a sound. Her soaked boots left damp marks on the stone floor. Her stomach rumbled, reminding her she hadn't eaten since breakfast, half a sandwich found at a diner after the owner had turned her back. The man in the pew didn't move. He was well-dressed, a dark suit that looked expensive, polished shoes, a gold watch on his wrist. A billionaire in a small, simple church seemed as out of place as she did. Mitchell Kane held a photograph between his fingers, staring at it intently under the flickering candlelight. He didn't notice the little girl approaching silently down the side aisle. Sadi should have hidden in the back, as she always did when she entered places like this. But something about that man caught her attention. Maybe it was the sadness in his eyes, or the way he held the photo as if it was something precious. She drew closer, moved by a curiosity she couldn't explain. When she was near enough to see the image in the photograph, her heart stopped for a second. "How do you know my mother?" The question burst from her mouth before she could stop it. Mitchell looked up, startled by the sudden voice. His eyes met a small girl with tangled brown hair and dirty clothes, but it was her words that struck him like lightning. He looked from the photograph to the girl and back to the photograph. Now he could see it. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her chin. The resemblance was undeniable. "It can't be," he whispered, feeling tears welling up in his eyes. "You're her daughter." Sadi took a step back, suddenly cautious. She hadn't expected this reaction. She thought maybe he was a friend of her mother's, or even a distant relative she had never met. But the raw emotion on his face was something else entirely. "Yes," she answered, lifting her chin with a fragile pride. "Elena was my mom." Mitchell felt the world sway beneath his feet. Elena, the name he hadn't heard from anyone else in 8 years. And this girl not only knew her, but was her daughter. "Jameson, please," he said, his voice almost pleading. "What is your name?" "Sadi," she replied, watching him with suspicious eyes. "Who are you?" "Mitchell," he managed to say, his throat tight. "Mitchell Kane. I knew your mother. Very well." Sadi studied him for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether to believe him. "Can't she had that same picture," she said finally, "in a frame next to her bed?" Mitchell nodded, unable to speak. The photo showed Eleanor smiling in a park, her dark hair blowing lightly in the wind. It was the last picture he had of her, taken 2 weeks before she disappeared. "How old are you, Sadi?" he asked, his voice trembling. She answered, holding up an open palm. Mitchell quickly did the math. Elena had disappeared 8 years ago. If this girl was 5, the thought hit him like a punch. "Where is your mother now?" The question came out almost as a whisper. Sadi's face fell, a shadow passing over her eyes. "She died a few months ago." The words landed like stones between them. Mitchell closed his eyes for a moment, feeling a pain so sharp he could barely breathe. Elena dead. The woman he had been searching for years, for whom he still lit a candle every week in this very church, was gone. "I'm sorry," he said, words entirely inadequate for what he felt. "I'm so sorry." Sadi just shrugged, a strangely adult gesture for someone so small. "It happens." "And you?" Mitchell asked, noticing for the first time the girl's condition. Worn-out clothes, a dirty face, dark circles under her eyes. "Who are you living with?" "No one," Sadi replied. "I get by." Mitchell felt a wave of horror. "You're, alone? Completely?" She nodded, as if it were no big deal. "Since Mom died. The money ran out. The landlady kicked me out. I tried staying at a shelter, but it was bad there. I ran away. Mitchell could barely process what he was hearing. This girl, possibly his daughter, was living on the streets, alone. "And your father?" he asked, almost dreading the answer. "Do you know him?" "No," Sadi shook her head. "Mom said he was far away. That he was a good man, but he couldn't be with us." Mitchell's heart clenched. Good. Elena had described him as good. "Are you hungry?" he asked suddenly, noticing how fragile the girl looked despite her defiant posture. Sadi's stomach answered for her, rumbling audibly. She blushed slightly but nodded. "There's a diner nearby," Mitchell said, standing up slowly so as not to startle her. "We can talk better there. What do you think?" Sadi hesitated, clearly weighing whether she could trust him. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, but just to eat." "Of course," he agreed, resisting the urge to reach out for her hand. Just to eat. Deli's diner was just 2 blocks from the church. A simple but cozy place with red booths and formica tables. At that time of night, it was nearly empty. The waitress, a middle-aged woman named Martha, raised her eyebrows when she saw Mitchell walk in with such a visibly distressed child, but she didn't ask questions. "The back booth, as always," she asked, already grabbing 2 menus. "Please," Mitchell replied, guiding Sadi through the diner. They sat across from each other. Under the diner's bright light, Mitchell could better see the girl's condition. Her hair wasn't just dirty, but matted as if it hadn't been combed in weeks. Her face had smudges of dirt, but also a few recent scratches. Her small hands were rough with broken nails. Sadi seemed even smaller under the unforgiving light, but her eyes remained intense, watching everything with a mix of caution and curiosity. "Order whatever you want," Mitchell said, pushing a menu toward her. Sadi looked at the menu with hesitation. "I can't read very well," she finally admitted in a low voice. "Just a few words." "That's okay," he replied gently. "How about a hamburger? French fries? A chocolate milkshake?" Her eyes lit up briefly before returning to their cautious expression. "That's fine." When Martha returned, Mitchell ordered the biggest combo on the menu for Sadi and just a coffee for himself. He couldn't eat anything with his stomach in knots. "So," he began, as Martha walked away, "your mother—" He couldn't complete the sentence. "She got sick," Sadi said, playing with the salt shaker on the table. "Cancer, that's what the doctor said. She tried to get treatment, but she didn't have enough money. Then it got worse really fast." Mitchell felt a sharp pain in his chest. Eleanor, suffering, without resources, while he, with all his fortune, didn't even know where she was. "Did she ever talk about the past?" "About where you came from?" he asked, trying to understand how Elena had simply vanished. Sadi shrugged. "She said we had to start over, that it was better that way, but sometimes, when she thought I was asleep, she would cry looking at that picture." The words hit Mitchell deeply. Eleanor had suffered from the separation, just as he had. "How did you live?" he asked, trying to imagine the life Elena had built away from him. "We moved around a lot," Sadi answered. "Mom worked in different places, waitress, cleaner, store clerk. The last apartment was small, but it had a big window. She liked that." Martha returned with the orders, interrupting the conversation. Sadi's eyes widened at the size of the hamburger. She waited only for Martha to leave before attacking the food with a voracity that spoke of days of hunger. Mitchell watched her eat, trying to process everything. Elena had disappeared 8 years ago, pregnant with his child almost certainly. She never said a word, never asked for help. Why? What could have made her disappear like that? To raise a child alone, away from him? "Sadi," he said, when she slowed down, "how did you know that was your mom, in the photo?" Sadi took a sip of her milkshake before answering. She had the same picture, in the frame, by her bed. She said it was from a happy day. A happy day. Mitchell remembered that day exactly. A picnic in the park, a blue sky, Elena laughing as he tried to balance a cherry on his nose. 2 weeks later, she was gone. "Sadi." Mitchell took a deep breath. "Where are you sleeping now?" She lowered her eyes to her plate. "I find places. Tonight I was going to try the church." "You don't have any relatives?" "No one to take care of you." No. The word fell like a stone between them. Mom said it was just the two of us in the world. Mitchell made a decision in that moment. It wasn't just about who this girl was or what had happened to Elena. It was about a child, alone, helpless, and possibly his daughter. Sadie, he said firmly but gently, I have a house. It's big, comfortable, out with empty rooms. I don't want you to spend another night on the street. She looked at him with suspicion. Why? You don't even know me. Mitchell hesitated, looking into those eyes that so strongly resembled Eleanor's. I knew your mother better than anyone, he said finally. We loved each other. And, he took a deep breath, based on the timing, on your age, I think I might be your father. Sadie stopped her milkshake halfway to her mouth. Her eyes widened, scanning Mitchell's face as if seeing him for the first time. You? She asked, her voice small. It's possible, he replied. It makes sense. Elena disappeared 8 years ago. You're 5. I never knew she was pregnant. I never knew about you. Sadie was quiet for a long moment, finishing her burger in silence. Mitchell didn't try to fill the void, giving her time to process. If you're my dad, she said at last, why did Mom leave? The question hit Mitchell like a knife. I don't know, he answered honestly. That's what hurts the most. I don't know why she did it. We were happy, at least I thought we were. Sadie nodded slowly, as if the answer made sense to her. Sometimes Mom would talk about a woman who didn't like her, who treated her badly. Mitchell felt a chill. His mother, Margaret, had never hidden her disapproval of Elena. She considered her unsuitable for her son, a girl too simple for a man of his standing. But would she have done something to drive Elena away? I'm taking you home with me tonight, Mitchell said, resolved. You can have a hot bath, sleep in a comfortable bed. Tomorrow, we'll figure things out. What do you think? The girl studied him for a long moment with those intense eyes. Then something unexpected happened. A small smile appeared on her face, lighting up her tired features. Okay, she said, in a softer voice than she had used so far. Thank you. Mitchell felt a lump in his throat. It was the first time he'd seen Sadie smile, and the sight hit him hard. Beneath all that toughness, there was still a child who just wanted to feel safe. You don't have to thank me, he said, smiling back. As they finished their meal, he watched Sadie's every gesture, every expression. There was so much of Elena in her. The way she tilted her head, how she slightly furrowed her brow when concentrating. But there were other things, details he recognized from his own reflection in the mirror. Mitchell Kane, a private and lonely billionaire who had built an empire to fill the void left by Elena, felt something awaken within him, an instinct he never knew he possessed. The certainty that this meeting was no accident, that this girl, this lost child who had appeared out of nowhere with Elena's eyes, was part of an unfinished story. His story. Mitchell Kane's house surprised Sadie. She had expected something big, of course. She'd seen rich people's houses in old magazines her mom brought home for her to color in, but she wasn't prepared for the mansion that appeared as the car drove through the iron gates. You live here alone? She asked, her nose nearly pressed against the car window. Mitchell smiled. Yes, I mean, there's Mrs. Winters, who takes care of the house, and Mr. Peterson, who tends the garden, but they don't live here. It's too big for just one person, Sadie observed with the frankness of a child. Mitchell nodded. You're right. The car stopped at the main entrance. When they got out, Sadie stood still, staring at the imposing house. She suddenly seemed to shrink even more inside her oversized coat. Shall we go in? Mitchell extended his hand. This time, to his surprise, Sadie took it. The small, rough hand in his felt so fragile that he felt a lump in his throat. The interior was warm and well lit, but Mitchell saw the house through Sadie's eyes for the first time. The expensive furniture, the artwork on the walls, the Persian rugs. It all seemed cold and impersonal, like a museum. Are you sleepy? He asked, noticing how she was rubbing her eyes. Sadie nodded, still looking around. I'll show you to your room then. He led her up the stairs, down a hallway with several doors. He stopped at the third one on the right and opened it. I prepared this one for you. The room was simple compared to the rest of the house. Light blue walls, a twin bed with a white comforter, a light wood dresser and an armchair by the window. On the nightstand, a lamp with star designs projected small points of light onto the ceiling when turned on. I didn't have time to prepare something more childlike, Mitchell explained, suddenly insecure. But we can decorate it however you want. Sadi entered the room, touching the soft comforter with her fingertips, as if she couldn't believe it was real. There's a bathroom in there, Mitchell pointed to a side door, with a bathtub. I think a warm bath would be nice before bed, don't you? She nodded, still silent. I'll get a clean towel and something for you to wear. I'll be right back. When he returned with a soft towel and one of his own t-shirts that would serve as a nightgown, he found Sadi standing in the exact same spot, staring at the bed. Is everything okay? He asked. It's just, she began, hesitantly. It looks so clean. And I'm so dirty. Mitchell felt his heart ache. Don't worry about that. That's what washing machines are for, he joked, trying to lighten the mood. Come on, I'll show you how the shower works. The bathroom was all in light tones, with a tub large enough for Sadi to swim in if she wanted. Mitchell explained the shower controls and left the towel and t-shirt on the hook on the door. I'll be downstairs if you need anything. Just call. Sadi nodded, still looking a bit lost amidst so much space and luxury. Mitchell went downstairs and straight to his office. He sat down heavily in his chair, finally allowing himself to feel the turmoil of emotions he had suppressed since the encounter in the church. Eleanor was dead. The news still seemed unreal, as if at any moment she could walk through the door with that smile that used to light up his days. And there was Sadi, a child who was probably his daughter. A girl who had been living on the streets alone while he slept on Egyptian cotton sheets in his empty mansion. A faint noise pulled him from his thoughts. Sadi was standing at the office door, almost unrecognizable. The bath had revealed a different girl. Her hair, now clean, was a shiny dark brown, like Eleanor's. Her face, and free of grime, showed slightly rosy cheeks and freckles on her nose. The t-shirt served as a dress on her, reaching almost to her ankles. Hi, Mitchell said, surprised. Feeling better? Sadi nodded. There was real hot water, she commented, as if it was something extraordinary. Are you still hungry? I can make something. No, she replied, looking around the office with curiosity. I just didn't know where you were. The implicit admission that she wanted to know where he was warmed something inside Mitchell. Come on, it's late. You must be tired. He led her back to the room. Sadi climbed onto the bed, sinking slightly into the soft mattress. Gad's very soft, she commented, bouncing lightly. Mitchell smiled. You get used to it. Do you want me to leave a light on? She hesitated, then shook her head. You can turn it off, but can you leave the door a little open? Of course, he agreed, understanding what went unsaid. Sadi wanted to know she could leave if she needed to. She wanted to be sure she wasn't trapped. When he turned off the main light, the star lamp cast dots of light across the ceiling and walls. Sadi's eyes widened in surprise. It looks like the sky, she said, looking up. I thought you might like it. Mitchell stood at the door for a moment, watching Sadi settle in. She pulled the pillow closer and hugged it as if it were a teddy bear. The gesture, so childlike and vulnerable, contrasted with the toughness she had shown until now. Good night, Sadi, he said, leaving the door ajar as promised. Good night, she replied, her voice already sleepy. Mitchell barely slept. He spent hours awake, thinking about everything that had happened, everything he still needed to find out. Every now and then, he would get up to check on Sadi, just to make sure she was really there, that it wasn't some strange dream. With each visit, he found her in the same position, hugging the pillow, breathing deeply. In the dark, with her face relaxed in sleep, the resemblance to Elena was even more apparent. The same face shape, the same small, upturned nose. But there was something else, something he recognized from his own reflection. The line of his jaw, the curve of his eyebrows. In the morning, it was the smell of coffee that woke him. For a moment, he forgot the previous day's events and wondered if Mrs. Winters had arrived early. Then he remembered Sadi. He got up quickly and went downstairs. In the kitchen, he found the girl standing on a stool, trying to reach a cereal box on the highest shelf. "Good morning," he said cautiously so as not to startle her. Sadi turned, not looking surprised. "Good morning. Sorry, I was hungry." "No need to apologize. This is your home now. You can take whatever you want, whenever you want." Something flickered in her eyes, perhaps surprise, perhaps distrust, but she just nodded and turned her attention back to the cereal. Mitchell helped her reach the box and got a bowl and milk. While she ate, sitting at the kitchen island, swinging her legs that didn't reach the floor, he made more coffee and some toast. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, sitting beside her. Sadi chewed for a moment before answering. "Yes," she said finally, and then, looking at her bowl, "Thank you. I haven't slept like that in a long time." The words, spoken so simply, hit Mitchell deeply. He had to turn away to hide the emotion on his face. "That's good," he managed to say. What do you want to do today?" Sadi shrugged, as if the idea of choosing activities was foreign to her. "I don't know. We need to buy some things for you. Clothes, shoes, maybe some toys, books." She seemed surprised by the suggestion. "I can keep these," she said, pointing to the clothes from the day before, which Mitchell had washed and folded on a chair. "You need more than one change of clothes," he explained gently, "and clothes that fit properly." She nodded, though she still seemed uncertain. "Okay." After breakfast, Mitchell called several stores, arranging for them to send selections of children's clothing to the house. He explained to Sadi that it would be easier and more comfortable for her to try things on at home, without the noise and bustle of the shops. The rest of the morning passed at a quiet pace. Mitchell showed Sadi the house, the library with floor-to-ceiling shelves, the music room with a grand piano that no one played, the garden with a small fountain. She observed everything with attentive eyes, asking occasional questions, but mostly remaining silent. It was in the library that something curious happened. Sadi stopped in front of a row of poetry books, running her fingers along the spines. "My mom liked these," she said, pointing to a volume by Pablo Neruda. Mitchell felt a chill. Elena had loved Neruda. She used to read the poems aloud to him, sometimes in Spanish, sometimes in English. Did she read to you?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Sadi nodded. "Sometimes before bed. I don't understand everything, but I like the sound of it." Mitchell took the book and opened it. Which one was her favorite? Sadi frowned, thinking in exactly the same way Elena did when she concentrated. "The one about love. That talks about love in many ways." Mitchell knew immediately which one it was. He turned the pages until he found the poem Sonnet 17. It was Elena's favorite. "This one?" he asked, showing the page to Sadi. Her eyes lit up. "Yes, that's the one." Mitchell felt something tighten in his chest. Such a small, intimate detail. Eleanor's favorite poem, now in her daughter's memory. In the evening, as he was preparing a simple dinner, pasta with tomato sauce, something he could make reasonably well, Mitchell heard a sound he didn't expect. Sadi was whistling. The melody was simple, a little hesitant, but unmistakable. It was the same song Elena used to whistle while she cooked. Mitchell froze, the wooden spoon halfway to the pot. The sound was so familiar, so unexpected, that for a moment he felt as if Elena were there in the kitchen with them. "Where did you learn that song?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual. Sadi, who was sitting at the table drawing on a piece of paper he had given her, shrugged. "Mum used to sing it when she was happy." Mitchell nodded, unable to speak. He turned his attention back to the source, but his mind was miles away, lost in memories of Elena whistling that same tune as she danced around the kitchen of the small apartment they shared before he inherited his family's fortune. That night, after putting Sadi to bed, again with the pillow held tightly against her chest, Mitchell went to his office and picked up a new notebook. On the first page, he wrote, "Things about Sadi." Underneath, he noted, "Whistles the same tune as Elena, frowns the same way when concentrating, knows Elena's favorite poem, has the same face shape." He didn't know why he felt the need to record these observations. Maybe to not forget any detail, or maybe to better understand who this child was who had entered his life so suddenly. The next day, Mitchell woke to the sound of laughter. He followed the noise to the kitchen, where he found Sadi and Mrs. Winters, his housekeeper, side by side preparing what looked like pancakes. "Good morning, Mr. Kane," Mrs. Winters greeted with a smile. "I see we have company." Mitchell had completely forgotten it was Monday, the day the housekeeper came. He hadn't planned how to explain Sadi's presence. "Mrs. Winters, this is Sadi," he said, opting for simplicity. "She'll be staying with us for a while." The housekeeper, a practical woman who had worked for him for years, just nodded. "Welcome, dear, we're making pancakes. Mr. Kane likes his with blueberries." "I've never had blueberries," Sadi commented, looking curiously at the small blue fruits. "Then today is your lucky day," Mrs. Winters replied, winking at her. Mitchell watched the interaction, surprised by how easily Sadi seemed to get along with the housekeeper. Perhaps it was the woman's motherly way, or perhaps Sadi was simply starting to feel safer. In the days that followed, Mitchell watched Sadi slowly adapt to her new life. Each day brought small changes. She began to explore the house on her own, started asking for food when she was hungry instead of waiting to be offered, and even began to leave a few toys scattered around her room. Every night, he added new observations to his notebook. Likes to draw suns on everything. Separates the colors of the food on her plate before eating. Sleeps hugging her pillow. Has the same laugh as Elena, short and musical. Uses the same expression as Elena when she's trying to decide something. A slight tilt of the head to the side. And each new entry made him feel something growing inside him. Something he had never experienced before. A protective feeling, a deep desire to see this child happy and safe. It was strange and scary, but also wonderfully right. In her room, Sadi was gradually beginning to leave her mark. The colorful drawings she made during the day now decorated the once bare walls. The collection of pebbles she had gathered during a walk in the garden was carefully lined up on the windowsill. On the shelf, a few children's books Mitchell had bought were beginning to show signs of frequent use. On the 5th day, Mitchell found Sadi sitting on the library floor, surrounded by photography books. She was focused on an old album he didn't even remember owning. "What did you find there?" he asked, sitting down beside her. "Pictures," Sadi replied, carefully turning the thick pages. "You were funny when you were little." Mitchell laughed. "We all are, I guess. There are no pictures of Mom here," she observed, flipping through a few more pages. Mitchell felt a pang in his chest. "No, He hesitated. "I keep her pictures somewhere else." Sadi nodded, accepting the explanation. She continued to look at the photographs for a few more minutes, then closed the album and looked at Mitchell with curiosity. "Were you and Mom married?" The question caught Mitchell by surprise. "No," he answered honestly. "But we lived together. We loved each other very much." "Why didn't you get married?" Mitchell thought for a moment. "I wanted to. I was planning to ask her to marry me, but before I could, she left." Sadi absorbed the information in silence. Then she asked, "Did you like her a lot?" "More than anything," Mitchell replied, feeling the emotion tighten his throat. "She was special." "She liked you too," Sadi said with the simple certainty of children. "She always got sad when she talked about the good man who was far away. I think that was you." Mitchell couldn't respond. The idea that Elena had spoken of him to Sadi, that she remembered him fondly even while away, touched something deep within him. That evening, as they had dinner together, something that had become a ritual, Mitchell realized that time had changed for him. Before, the days dragged on, each hour stretching endlessly in the solitude of his mansion. Now, the moments felt richer, fuller, but they also passed differently. It was as if every second with Sadi needed to be savored, stored in memory. Time passed more slowly when she was around, not in a tedious way, but in a precious way, as if the universe were granting him a few extra moments to memorize the sound of her laugh, the way she hummed while drawing, the look of contentment when she tasted something delicious for the first time, and at the same time, the days flew by one after another, each bringing new discoveries, new moments of connection. In just a week, his life had changed completely. The house, Once an empty space filled only with things, now felt like a home. As he watched Sadi eat spaghetti, laughing when a noodle escaped and left a smear of sauce on her chin, Mitchell understood what he was feeling. That new sensation, growing inside him day by day, had a name. A father's love. A love he didn't know he was capable of feeling, but which now seemed the most natural thing in the world. A love that made him want to be better, to do better, to create a world where Sadi could be happy and safe. When she looked up and smiled at him, a smile that lit up her whole face, so much like Eleanor's, Mitchell knew he would do anything to protect this child, his daughter. "What are you thinking about?" Sadi asked, noticing his distant gaze. Mitchell smiled back. "About how lucky I am to have found you." Sadi tilted her head slightly to the side, another gesture reminiscent of Eleanor, and considered his words. "I'm lucky too," she said finally. "Thanks for letting me stay." "Always," Mitchell replied, and he knew it was true. No matter what happened from now on, Sadi had found her place, with him, at home. Mitchell's house had a wide back porch overlooking the well-tended garden. On that autumn afternoon, the sky was a perfect shade of blue, with a few white clouds floating lazily by. The kind of day that seemed made for being outdoors. Mitchell brought out 2 mugs of hot chocolate and found Sadi sitting on the wooden swing, her legs dangling in the air, watching a squirrel scamper across the lawn. She had been living with him for almost 2 weeks, 2 weeks that had completely transformed his life. "Careful, it's hot," he said, handing one of the mugs to her. Sadi accepted it with a small smile. In recent days, she smiled more, talked more. It was as if, little by little, the layers of protection she had built around herself were starting to come down. Mitchell sat beside her on the swing. For a while, they were silent, just watching the garden and sipping their chocolate. It was a comfortable silence, different from those tense first days. "Chad, you like it here?" Mitchell finally asked. Sadi nodded, looking at the mug in her hands. "It's pretty and quiet." "Too quiet sometimes," he commented. "Before you came, the silence was heavy." She looked at him with curiosity. "Did you feel lonely?" The question, so direct and yet so perceptive from someone so young, caught Mitchell by surprise. "Yes," he admitted. "Very." Sadi looked back at the garden. "Me too. Even when Mom was alive, we moved around so much I never had real friends." Mitchell felt that familiar pang in his chest. Every new piece of information about the life Elena had led with Sadi made him question why she had left, why she had never asked for help. "And after he hesitated, still uncomfortable talking directly about Elena's death. "Afterward, how was it for you?" Sadi shrugged, a gesture that had become familiar, a movement that said, "It's nothing," even when it was clearly something important. "It was hard," as she said simply. "At the hospital, people were nice. They gave me food and there was a nurse who brought books for me to look at. But after Mom died, they took me to a place with other kids." "A shelter?" Mitchell asked. "I think so. It was noisy. And the big kids would take the little kids' things." She took a sip of chocolate before continuing. "I didn't like it there, so I ran away." Mitchell tried to imagine Sadi, at just 5 years old, running away from a shelter to live on the streets. The idea was unbearable. "How long were you alone?" "I don't know for sure, but it was a long time. I was counting the days at first, but then I stopped." "And how did you manage?" The question came out with difficulty. Part of him didn't want to know, didn't want to imagine this small child facing the world alone. Sadi looked at him, her eyes older than her face. "I took food when people weren't looking. I slept in hidden places. I learned fast that you couldn't trust just anyone." The simplicity with which she described her struggle for survival was more painful than any dramatic story. "I'm glad you're taking care of me," she said suddenly, still looking at the garden. "I was tired of being scared, of looking for food, of sleeping curled up." Mitchell felt his eyes burn. He lowered his head, too moved to speak immediately. When he finally found his voice, it came out hoarse, laden with emotion. "You will never have to go through that again." It was a promise. To Sadi, to himself, and in a way, to Elena too. Sadie didn't reply, but her small hand found Mitchell's and held it briefly, a gesture that said more than any words could. They sat like that for a while, side by side on the swing, watching the garden as their mugs of hot chocolate cooled in their hands. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Mitchell had 1,000 questions he wanted to ask, 1,000 things he wanted to know about the years he had missed of Sadie's life, about the years Elena had lived away from him. But there was one question in particular that gave him no peace. "Sadie," he began hesitantly, "did your mother talk about your father?" The question hung in the air between them. Sadie continued to look at the garden as if she hadn't heard. For a moment, Mitchell thought she wouldn't answer. "No," she said finally, her voice devoid of emotion, "just a simple fact." Mitchell felt a silent pain spread within him. He didn't know what he had expected. Perhaps that Elena had told Sadie about him, kept his memory alive somehow. But apparently, she had completely severed that bond. "Never," he insisted, though he knew he was pushing. Sadie shook her head. "She just said he was far away, that he was a good man. But when I asked more, she would get sad, so I stopped asking." A good man. The words echoed in Mitchell's mind. Elena considered him good, even after leaving. That meant something, didn't it? Mitchell wanted to tell Sadie he suspected he was her father. The resemblance between them was undeniable. The same eyes, the same face shape. The timeline made sense. But something held him back. What if he was wrong? What if there was another explanation for Elena's disappearance? He couldn't raise her hopes only to disappoint her later. "Why did you ask about him?" Sadie questioned, turning to look at him. Mitchell shrugged, trying to seem casual. "Just curious, to better understand your story." "How does it work?" she asked, curious. "It's very simple. We just need a little bit of saliva, like when you use a cotton swab on your cheek, and we send it to a lab. They analyze it and tell us if we're father and daughter." Sadie considered the information for a moment. "Does it hurt?" Mitchell smiled. "Not at all. It's faster than brushing your teeth." "Okay," she agreed with a shrug. "So we can do it." The sun had almost disappeared below the horizon, leaving the sky in shades of purple and dark blue. The first stars were beginning to appear, bright against the twilight. "It's getting cold," Mitchell observed. "Let's go inside. I can make pasta for dinner." "With that red sauce?" Sadie asked, her eyes lighting up. "Exactly how you like it," he agreed, smiling. As they walked back to the house, Mitchell felt Sadie's small hand slide into his. It was a new gesture. Usually, he was the one to initiate physical contact, not her. The simple touch of trust meant more to him than Sadie could ever understand. In the kitchen, Mitchell started preparing dinner while Sadie sat at the table, drawing on one of the many notepads he had bought for her. The sound of the pencil against the paper, the pots on the stove, the soft music from the radio, it all blended into a domestic symphony that made the house feel more alive than it had ever been. "What are you drawing?" he asked, looking over her shoulder as he stirred the sauce. "A family," Sadie replied, without looking up from the paper. Mitchell felt a tightness in his chest. He moved closer to see the drawing better. There were 3 figures on the paper. A large one, clearly a man with dark hair and what looked like a suit. A small one, obviously a girl in a dress and with a big smile. And between the two, floating slightly above, a female figure with long hair, drawn in lighter strokes. "That's Mom," Sadie explained, noticing Mitchell's gaze. "And that's me." Mitchell swallowed hard, looking at the male figure in the drawing. "And who is this?" Sadie shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe my dad. I wish I knew what he looks like." The words hit him hard. She didn't see him as her father, at least not yet. Mitchell felt a mix of disappointment and determination. He needed to find out the truth, for her and for himself. She nodded, returning her focus to the drawing, adding more details. Flowers all around, a smiling sun, even the stray cat that sometimes appeared in the garden. As he finished preparing dinner, Mitchell couldn't stop thinking about the conversation on the porch. about the revelations of Sadi's time on the streets, about the fact that Elena had never spoken of him. There was something painful in knowing his existence had been almost erased from his daughter's life, but there was also something hopeful in the way Sadi had so easily accepted him as part of her life, as her family. The DNA test was just a formality. Mitchell knew that now. In his heart, Sadi was already his daughter. And from the drawing on the table, it seemed that in her heart, he was already her father. After dinner, as he helped Sadi get ready for bed, a ritual that now included a bath, brushing teeth, a story, and the star lamp turned on, Mitchell thought about how his life had changed in just 2 weeks. "What story do you want tonight?" he asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. Sadi was already settled, her pillow held tight as always. "Can we have the one about the bear looking for honey?" Mitchell smiled and picked up the book from the nightstand. He began to read, watching as Sadi's eyes grew heavy with each turned page. When he reached the end, she was already almost asleep. "Good night, Sadi," he whispered, tucking the blanket around her. "Good night," she murmured sleepily. Mitchell watched her for a moment, seeing her face relax in sleep. The resemblance to Elena was undeniable, but now he could also see features that resembled his own face, the line of his jaw, the shape of his eyebrows. As he left the room, leaving the door ajar as always, Mitchell felt a mix of emotions he couldn't quite define. There was affection growing for this girl, no doubt, but there were also doubts, unanswered questions. In his office, Mitchell sat in the leather armchair and looked at the photograph of Elena he kept on his desk, the same photo that Sadi had recognized in the church. So many questions, so many mysteries. Why did she leave? Why did she never tell Sadi about him? What really happened 8 years ago? Mitchell picked up the notebook, where he recorded his observations about Sadi, and flipped through the pages, rereading his notes on the similarities between her and Elena. But now he also looked for traits that might have come from him, the eyes, the jawline, the small gestures or mannerisms. "I need to be sure," he murmured to himself. The circumstantial evidence was strong, but not enough. He needed concrete answers before saying anything to Sadi. It was a silent promise Mitchell made to himself as he closed the notebook. A promise to find the truth, but also to protect Sadi, regardless of what that truth revealed. Outside, the night was clear and starry. The same sky that had once covered Elena and Sadi on their nights of escape and uncertainty now seemed kinder, more welcoming. The next morning, there would be more questions to ask, more answers to seek. There would be important decisions to make about how to proceed, about how to uncover the past without compromising the future he was beginning to build with Sadi. But on that night, in that moment, there was only the simple truth that Sadi had shared on the porch, the truth of the street, harsh and unadorned, and the equally simple promise Mitchell had made in response. "You will never have to go through that again." A promise that would remain regardless of what the future revealed. The doubt had settled in Mitchell's mind like a persistent seed. With each day that passed with Sadi, that seed grew, fed by small observations, subtle similarities, calculations of time. It was no longer just a possibility. It was an urgent need to know the truth. That morning, Mitchell watched Sadi eat breakfast. The way she furrowed her brow as she concentrated on cutting her pancake into perfectly equal pieces, the way she tilted her head slightly when she was curious, the exact shade of her eyes in the morning light, the same shade as his own. "What is it?" Sadi asked, noticing his gaze. Mitchell smiled, covering it up. "Nothing. Just thinking I have to do a little work today. Do you mind staying with Mrs. Winters for a few hours?" Sadi shrugged, a gesture that had become familiar. "It's okay. She said she was going to teach me how to make cookies." Mrs. Winters had become a constant presence in the house since Sadi's arrival. The housekeeper, normally reserved and formal, seemed to have a completely different side when it came to the girl. The two had developed an immediate friendship, based mostly on culinary adventures in the kitchen. "Great," Mitchell said, drinking the last of his coffee. "I'll be back for lunch." After Sadi finished breakfast and went to get dressed, Mitchell walked slowly to the bathroom she used. The door was open, the space empty. On the counter, next to the sink, was the pink hairbrush he had bought for her the previous week. Mitchell hesitated for only a second before picking it up. Several strands of dark brown hair were tangled in the bristles. Carefully, he removed a few and placed them in a small envelope he had prepared. His own strands of hair were already in a similar envelope. He felt uncomfortable for a moment, almost like an intruder, but he needed to know, not just for himself, but for Sadi too. She deserved to know her history, her identity. When Mrs. Winters arrived, Mitchell was already ready to leave. He found Sadi in the living room, focused on a 100-piece puzzle they had been working on together for the past few days. "I'll be back soon," he said, leaning down to kiss the top of her head. Sadi nodded without taking her eyes off the puzzle. "Bring more pieces of this kind when you come back," she requested, showing a piece with a blue edge. Mitchell smiled. "I will." In the car on the way to the lab, Mitchell couldn't stop thinking about how his life had changed in recent weeks. The house, once an empty and silent space, was now full of life. There were drawings on the refrigerator, toys in the living room, laughter echoing through the hallways, and at the center of it all, Sadi, with her serious eyes and her rare but stunning smile. To think that he could have lost all of this, that he had missed 5 years of her life, made his stomach tighten with a kind of pain he had never experienced before. The lab was in a discreet building downtown. Mitchell had called ahead and scheduled an appointment with Dr. Reynolds, an old family acquaintance. He wanted absolute discretion in this matter. "Mitchell," the doctor greeted, extending his hand. "Long time no see." "Thanks for seeing me on such short notice, Jonathan," Mitchell replied, shaking the offered hand. Dr. Reynolds led him to his office, a tidy space with shelves full of medical books and a few family photographs. They sat across from each other, separated by a dark wooden desk. "So," the doctor began, "you mentioned a paternity test." Mitchell nodded, taking the 2 envelopes from his inner jacket pocket. "Yes, I need to know if this child is my daughter." "And the mother?" Dr. Reynolds asked, accepting the envelopes. "Deceased," Mitchell replied briefly. He wasn't ready to share the whole story, not even with an old friend. The doctor nodded, understanding the reticence. "I see. Well, that simplifies the process legally, at least. The samples look adequate. As for the urgency, as soon as possible," Mitchell interrupted. "Cost is not an issue. In that case, I can use our priority lab. We'll have the results in 48 hours. Mitchell felt a mix of relief and apprehension. Only 2 days to confirm what his heart already knew. "Perfect," he said, standing up. "I'll await your call." As he left the lab, Mitchell decided not to go straight home. He needed time to think, to process what he was doing and what would come next. He drove aimlessly for a while, eventually stopping at a quiet park on the outskirts of the city. It was a place he used to come with Elena, in the days when they were just 2 young people in love, before the money, before the complications. He sat on a bench under a leafy tree and looked at the small lake in front of him. Ducks swam peacefully, oblivious to the turmoil of human emotions. How simple it would be to be a duck, Mitchell thought with irony. In 2 days, he would have the official confirmation, but deep down he already knew Sadi was his daughter. The eyes, the chin, even certain gestures and expressions that couldn't have come from Elena. The math didn't lie either. Elena had disappeared when she was about 3 months pregnant. Sadi was 5 now, it all fit. The question that tormented him wasn't whether Sadi was his daughter, but why Elena had run away. Why she had never told him about the pregnancy. Why she had chosen to raise their child alone, often in poor conditions, when he could have provided comfort and security for them both. What had happened in those last days before her disappearance? Mitchell tried to recall every detail, every word spoken, every gesture. Had they argued? No, they were fine, making plans for the future. He had mentioned formally introducing her to his family. His family. His mother. The memory struck Mitchell like a bolt of lightning. His mother had never approved of Eleanor. She considered her inadequate too, a girl too simple for the heir to the Kane fortune. She had tried to dissuade him countless times, offering to introduce him to young women more suited to his position. Could his mother have done something, said something to Elena? The idea seemed absurd, but at the same time, Mitchell shook his head, trying to push the thoughts away. He couldn't accuse anyone without proof. First, he needed to confirm paternity. Then he would investigate the past, step by step. When he got home, he found Sadi and Mrs. Winters in the kitchen, covered in flour and laughing as they took a batch of cookies out of the oven. "Look, Mitchell," Sadi exclaimed when she saw him. "Now we made chocolate chip cookies." "I see that," he replied, smiling as he noticed the flour smudges on her nose. "They look delicious." "We'll let them cool a bit," Mrs. Winters explained, placing the baking sheet on a wire rack. "Miss Sadi is an excellent kitchen assistant." Sadi beamed with pride, and Mitchell's heart ached. How could anyone not want this child in their life? How had he himself missed 5 years without knowing her? The next 2 days seemed to drag on. Mitchell tried to maintain a normal routine with Sadi, breakfast together, a few hours of work in his office while she played or drew lunchy, a walk in the garden in the afternoon, dinner and stories before bed. But his mind was constantly on the test, on the confirmation that was to come. On the morning of the 3rd day, the phone rang while Sadi was still asleep. Mitchell answered on the first ring, anxious. "Mr. Kane, Dr. Reynolds speaking. We have your test results." Mitchell took a deep breath and, while positive, with 99.9998% certainty. "The child is, without a doubt, your biological daughter." Even though he had been expecting this result, hearing the words aloud made Mitchell feel as if the air had been sucked from his lungs. He thanked the doctor, hung up, and sat down heavily in the nearest chair. Sadi was his daughter, his. Years of unanswered questions, of searching, of emptiness, culminated in this moment of absolute certainty. And with that certainty came an avalanche of emotions that Mitchell was not prepared to face. Anger. Anger for being deprived of the first years of his daughter's life, for not having been there for her first steps, her first words, her first drawings. Regret. For not having searched for Elena harder, for not having discovered the truth sooner, for not being able to help them when they needed it. Guilt. Guilt that Sadi had gone hungry, had slept on the street, had known fear so early in life, while he lived in an empty mansion, surrounded by material comforts and loneliness. And, surprisingly, hope. Hope because, despite everything, he now had a chance to be a father, to watch Sadi grow, to protect and love her as he should have from the beginning. The tears came without warning, silent at first. Then in sobs he tried to stifle with his hands. He cried for all the lost moments, for Elena who was gone forever, for Sadi who had suffered so much. He cried until he felt there were no more tears to shed. When he finally composed himself, he washed his face with cold water and looked at his reflection in the mirror. The same eyes that Sadi had looked back at him, now red and swollen. "Dad," he said to his reflection, testing the word. It sounded strange and yet perfectly natural. He was a father. He had been a father for 5 years without knowing it. Mitchell heard movement upstairs. Sadi was waking up. He took a deep breath, trying to prepare himself to face her with this new knowledge. Should he tell her now, or wait for a more appropriate moment? How would a 5-year-old process this information? Before he could decide, he heard Sadi's light footsteps coming down the stairs. She appeared at the kitchen door, still in her pajamas, her hair messy, her eyes, his eyes, still sleepy. "Good morning," she said, yawning. "Good morning," Mitchell replied, struggling to keep his voice steady. Sadi studied him for a moment, frowning slightly. "Were you crying?" "Children. So observant and ruthlessly honest." "A little," he admitted. There was no point in lying. "Sometimes grown-ups cry too." "Why?" she asked, sitting at the table as Mitchell automatically started making breakfast. "Because," he hesitated, searching for the right words. "Because I was thinking about sad things, and about happy things too." At the same time, Sadi looked confused. Mitchell smiled, cracking eggs into a bowl. "Yes, sometimes we feel several things at once. It's complicated." Sadi nodded, as if she perfectly understood this emotional complexity. "Mom used to cry sometimes too. She said it was because she missed the way things were before." The simple, casual mention made Mitchell's heart ache. Before, yeah, before we had to leave. She never really explained. Mitchell continued making breakfast, trying to process this new information Elena missed before. The time with him, the life they could have had together. Sadi, he began carefully. Would you like to know more about your father? She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I think so. Mum said one day I would understand everything. But then she got sick. Mitchell felt a lump in his throat. Elena had planned to tell Sadi the truth eventually. She hadn't completely erased his existence. What if... He hesitated, his heart pounding. What if I told you I know who your father is? Sadi's eyes widened, all sleepiness instantly gone. You know him? Mitchell nodded, unable to speak. Is he nice? Does he know about me? Does he live far away? The questions came in rapid succession, Sadi's voice excited in a way he had rarely witnessed. He is... Mitchell took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the revelation he was about to make. But not now. Not like this, in the kitchen, with scrambled eggs on the stove and Sadi still in her pajamas. This moment deserved more. He is someone very special, he said finally, and I'm going to tell you all about him. But first, let's have breakfast, okay? And then, maybe we can go on a special outing today. Sadi seemed slightly disappointed with the delay, but she nodded. Okay, but you promise you'll tell me? I promise, Mitchell replied, feeling the weight of the word. Today. As he served breakfast to his daughter, Mitchell knew there was more ahead than just the revelation of his paternity. There was a past to be uncovered, questions that needed answers. Why had Elena left? Who or what had driven her away from him? And more importantly, how could he protect Sadi from the pain these discoveries might bring? Mitchell looked at the girl sitting across from him, eating scrambled eggs and excitedly recounting a dream she'd had about a cat that could fly. His daughter. His blood. His responsibility. The confirmation of the DNA test had planted more than just the certainty of fatherhood. It had planted the seed of truth, a truth he needed to uncover completely. No matter how painful, doubt had turned into necessity. Now that necessity was turning into determination. Mitchell had to face the past, for Sadi and for himself. He needed to find out what had really happened to Eleanor and why she had disappeared carrying their unborn child. The full truth was waiting to be discovered, and Mitchell Kane never backed down from a challenge, especially when the future of his newfound family was at stake. The Kane mansion stood at the highest point in the city, an imposing structure of stone and glass that seemed to watch over everything around it with an air of superiority. Mitchell parked his car in the circular driveway and sat for a few minutes, gathering the courage for what he was about to do. Since confirming that Sadi was truly his daughter, the suspicion about his mother's role in Elena's disappearance had given him no peace. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together, forming a picture he feared but needed to confront. He had left Sadi with Mrs. Winters, saying only that he needed to handle an important matter. The girl had accepted the explanation without question, busy with a new coloring book he had bought the day before. The butler answered the door with the same impassive expression as always. Mr. Mitchell, what a pleasant surprise. Hello, Giles. Is my mother in? Mrs. Kane is in the conservatory. Shall I announce you? That won't be necessary. I know the way. Mitchell walked through the halls of the house where he had grown up, each step echoing on the marble floor. The place had never felt welcoming, even when his father was still alive. It was more a status symbol than a home, filled with valuable antiques and immaculate spaces where nothing was out of place. He found Margaret Kane exactly where Giles had said, seated in a white wicker armchair, surrounded by exotic plants, reading a book with a cup of tea beside her. At 65, she maintained the elegance that had always characterized her. Perfectly coiffed hair, discreet makeup, flawless posture. Mitchell, she said, lowering her book as she saw him. What a surprise. You didn't tell me you were coming. There was no genuine warmth in her voice, only the rehearsed politeness of someone playing a social role. We need to talk, Mother, he replied, not approaching for the formal kiss that would have been protocol. Margaret raised a perfect eyebrow. You seem serious. Sit down. Would you like some tea? No, thank you. Mitchell took a seat in the chair opposite his mother's, feeling the tension build in his shoulders. How to begin? How to ask your own mother if she had destroyed your chance at happiness? I found Elena's daughter, he said at last, deciding to get straight to the point. The cup Margaret was lifting to her lips stopped midway. For a moment, just a moment, the mask of perfect composure faltered. Elena? That girl you were involved with years ago? Yes. The woman I loved, who disappeared 8 years ago. Margaret placed the cup back on its saucer with a faint clink. And you said, a daughter? Yes. Elena had a daughter. My daughter? Mitchell watched her closely, looking for any revealing reaction. Elena died a few months ago. The girl, Sadi, was living on the streets. I found her by chance. Margaret seemed genuinely surprised. That is unexpected. Are you sure the child is yours? Absolutely. I had a DNA test done. A heavy silence fell between them. Mitchell could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner of the room, marking the seconds it took for his mother to process the information. I see, she said finally. And what do you intend to do now? I'm taking care of her. Sadi is living with me. Mitchell leaned forward, his eyes fixed on his mother's. But there's something I need to know. Why did Elena disappear? Why did she never tell me about the pregnancy? Margaret looked away, pretending to adjust the sleeve of her silk blouse. How would I know? She just left, didn't she? Perhaps she didn't want the responsibility of a child. Or maybe... No, Mitchell interrupted, his voice harsh. Elena wouldn't do that. She loved me. We had plans. Something or someone made her leave. Margaret's eyes met his again, now with a defensive glint. Are you accusing me of something, Mitchell? I'm asking you directly. Did you have anything to do with Elena's disappearance? The clock continued its relentless ticking. A bird sang outside, oblivious to the tension filling the conservatory. Margaret took another sip of tea, with studied calm, before answering. You were always so dramatic, son, just like your father. Answer the question, mother. Margaret sighed, as if dealing with a stubborn child. What do you want me to say? That I never approved of that girl. That was no secret. She wasn't right for you. No formal education, no connections, no refinement. What could she offer the Cain heir? The coldness in his mother's words made Mitchell's stomach turn. She offered me love, something you've never understood. Love, Margaret laughed, a humorless sound. Love doesn't build empires, Mitchell. Love doesn't secure social standing. Love is for common people, not for families like ours. Mitchell felt anger rising within him. What did you do, mother? Margaret placed the cup on the table with a calculated move. Her eyes, so similar to his in color, but so different in expression, hardened. I did what any mother would do to protect her son's future. What did you do? The silence stretched for several seconds before Margaret finally spoke, her voice controlled, without regret. I never accepted Eleanor. She was poor, simple. I sent her away. I told her she was getting in the way of your future. The words fell like stones between them. Mitchell felt the air leave his lungs. You sent her away. I spoke with her. I explained the realities of life. I offered her money to start over somewhere else, away from you. Money. The word came out as a horrified whisper. You tried to buy her. Margaret shifted in her chair, unyielding. Initially, yes, but she refused. She said she loved you too much to accept any deal, so I had to be more persuasive. What does that mean? Mitchell's voice trembled with restrained anger. I explained that your career would be ruined if you stayed with her, that your father would change his will, that you would lose everything that was meant to be yours. And most importantly, she paused. I told her that you had already agreed to break up with her, but didn't have the courage to do it in person. Mitchell felt as if he had been punched. You lied to her. You told her I wanted to end things. It was for the best, Margaret replied, showing no remorse. She was a temporary distraction. You would have gotten over it eventually. I loved her. Mitchell's voice echoed through the room. We were planning to get married. Youthful foolishness. You needed someone of your social standing, not a waitress with no future. Mitchell stood up abruptly, unable to remain seated. She was pregnant. Pregnant with your granddaughter. Did you know that? For the first time, a flash of genuine surprise crossed Margaret's face. No, she didn't mention a pregnancy. Maybe because you were too busy destroying her life to ask. Mitchell's anger was overflowing now. You didn't just take her from me, you took my daughter from me too. Margaret maintained her composure, though her fingers tightened slightly on the arm of the chair. I didn't know about the child. If I had known... What? Would you have acted differently, or would you have used it as another tool for manipulation? Don't be unfair, Mitchell. Everything I did was for your own good. Mitchell laughed, a bitter sound. My good. I spent 8 years searching for her, 8 years wondering what I had done wrong, why she had left without an explanation. And all this time, you knew. You caused all of it. I did what I thought was best, Margaret insisted, her voice finally showing some emotion. You were too young to start a family. You had your future ahead of you. It wasn't your decision to make. Mitchell took a deep breath, trying to control himself. And look at the result. Elena died alone, fighting an illness without enough resources for proper treatment. My daughter went hungry, slept on the streets, knew the kind of fear no child should ever know. All because you decided you knew what was best for everyone. Margaret fell silent, for the first time seeming to grasp the magnitude of what she had done. Mitchell, she began, but he raised a hand, cutting her off. I don't want to hear any more. There is no justification for what you did. He walked to the door, then stopped and turned one last time. I have a daughter now, a wonderful daughter who, despite everything, survived. I will dedicate my life to making sure she never suffers again. As for you, I don't know if I can ever forgive you. With those words, Mitchell left the conservatory, walked through the cold mansion corridors and stepped out into the sunlight. As he got into his car, he felt a huge weight lift from his shoulders, replaced by a clarity he hadn't experienced in years. Now he knew the truth. A painful truth, but one that at least explained the inexplicable. Elena hadn't abandoned him. She had been driven away by lies and manipulation. As he drove back home, his real home base, where Sadi was waiting for him, Mitchell made a silent promise to Elena and himself. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was still in his hands, and he would do everything to make that future worthy of the involuntary sacrifice Elena had made. Mitchell drove back home in silence, his mother's revelations echoing in his mind. Each mile driven helped to calm his anger, turning it into determination. The truth, however painful, had been revealed. Now it was time to share it with the one who mattered most, Sadi. When he arrived home, he found her in the garden with Mrs. Winters, watering the flowers they had planted together the week before. Upon seeing him, Sadi smiled and waved, a simple gesture that warmed his heart. "How are our flowers?" he asked, approaching. "They're growing," Sadi answered proudly. "Mrs. Winters said they'll have buds soon." The housekeeper noticed something in Mitchell's expression and discreetly moved away, muttering something about preparing lunch. Mitchell silently thanked her for her perception. "Sadi," he said, crouching down to her level, "can we talk for a minute? It's important." She nodded, setting the watering can on the ground. "Did I do something wrong?" No, Mitchell quickly reassured her. "Nothing like that. Hey, it's just a talk we need to have." They walked to the bench under the old oak tree, Sadi's favorite spot in the garden. The midday sun filtered through the leaves, creating dancing patterns on the ground. Mitchell sat down, his heart racing. How do you explain something so complex to a 5-year-old? How do you tell a truth that will change her life forever? "I'll remember when you asked me about your dad, and I said I knew who he was." Sadi nodded, her attentive eyes fixed on him. "Well," Mitchell took a deep breath, "I found out something very important. Something even I didn't know until I found you." He paused, searching for the right words. Sadi waited patiently, swinging her legs that didn't reach the ground. Sadi, I met your mother a long time ago. We loved each other very much. But things happened that separated us before I knew she was expecting a baby. That baby Was you? Her eyes widened slightly as she began to understand where the conversation was heading. I'm your father, Mitchell said at last, with all the sweetness he could muster in his voice. There was a moment of complete silence. The gentle wind rustled the leaves above them. A bird sang in the distance. The world kept spinning while, on that small garden bench, two lives reconnected in a way neither of them had ever imagined possible. Sadie looked at him, processing the information. Then slowly, a shy smile appeared on her face. I didn't know, she said simply, but I felt you were special. The words, so simple and so profound, hit Mitchell like a wave. He felt tears form in his eyes, but made no effort to hold them back. You're not surprised, he asked, his voice choked with emotion. Sadie shrugged. That characteristic gesture of hers, a little, but it makes sense. We have the same eyes. Mrs. Winters said so too. Mitchell laughed, a sound mixed with a choked sob. The perception of children was sometimes astounding. Does this mean I can stay with you forever? She asked, a rare vulnerability peeking through her usual composure. Yes, Mitchell answered firmly, forever. Nothing will ever separate us now. Sadie slid along the bench until she was closer to him. Then, in a move that took Mitchell completely by surprise, she threw her arms around his neck and hugged him. It was the first time she had initiated such a full embrace. Mitchell wrapped her in his arms, feeling her small, warm body against his. It wasn't the hug of strangers, or even friends. It was the hug of a father and a daughter who, against all odds, had found their way back to each other. It felt like a home rediscovered. They stayed like that for a long moment, neither wanting to break the connection. When they finally separated, Mitchell saw something in Sadie's eyes he hadn't noticed before, a spark of belonging, of security. What do you say we do something special today? He suggested, discreetly wiping away a tear. Just the two of us, to celebrate. Sadie's face lit up. Like what? Whatever you want. We can go to the park, the zoo, a museum, anywhere. She thought for a moment, her face concentrated. The park, she decided finally. The big one with the lake and the ducks. Excellent choice, Mitchell smiled. Let's get ready, and we'll spend the day there. Just the two of us. An hour later, they were walking along the tree-lined paths of the city's central park. It was a perfect day. Blue sky, pleasant temperature, a light occasional breeze. Mitchell held Sadie's hand, still marveling at how something so small could mean so much. Sadie seemed lighter, more relaxed, as if an invisible weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She skipped occasionally, pointing out squirrels, colorful flowers, and other details that would normally go unnoticed by adult eyes. They stopped to feed the ducks at the lake, laughing when a particularly insistent goose tried to grab all the bread for itself. Mitchell bought cotton candy from a street vendor and smiled as Sadie's face lit up at the blue and pink treat. I've never had this before, she confessed, trying it cautiously. And what do you think? Mitchell asked, watching her reaction. It's like eating a sweet cloud, she replied, now taking bigger pieces. Mitchell laughed, feeling a simple, pure happiness he hadn't experienced in years. He took his phone out of his pocket and captured the moment, Sadie with her face partially covered in cotton candy, a genuine smile revealing the gap where a baby tooth had recently fallen out. The day passed in a succession of small discoveries and shared moments. They visited the playground, where Mitchell pushed Sadie on the swing, each of her laughs erasing a little more of the past's pain. They bought ice cream and sat on the grass to watch people go by. They had a competition to see who could skip a stone the most times on the lake's surface. Mitchell let Sadie win, but it wasn't easy. She had a natural talent. At every moment, Mitchell took pictures. He wanted to capture everything, to save every expression, every smile, every moment of discovery in his daughter's eyes. These were the memories he never had the chance to create before, and each one was precious. Why are you taking so many pictures? Sadie finally asked, after Mitchell captured an image of her chasing a butterfly. Because I want to remember everything, he answered honestly. Because I missed so many moments of your life and I don't want to miss any more. Sadie considered the answer with the seriousness she sometimes showed. Can we take one together? Of course, Mitchell smiled. They found a spot overlooking the lake. where the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. Mitchell held out his arm, holding the phone to capture the two of them together. "Say cheese," he instructed. "Cheese," Sadi replied, making a funny face. Mitchell took several photos in a row, some serious, some making faces, laughing, looking at each other. In each one, there was a visible connection, a bond that transcended the lost time. When he reviewed the images later, one in particular caught his eye. It was a photo where neither he nor Sadi was looking at the camera, but at each other. There was something in their exchanged glances, something deep and indefinable, that perfectly captured what they both felt. This is the kind of memory they never let me have, Mitchell thought, looking at the image as Sadi watched the last rays of sun reflect on the water. Now, no one can stop me. On the way home, Sadi fell asleep in the back seat of the car, exhausted after a day of activities. Mitchell watched her in the rearview mirror from time to time, still barely believing this wonderful child was his daughter. When they got home, he carried her inside, feeling her small, relaxed body in his arms. Sadi barely stirred as he put her in bed and took off her shoes. "Good night, Dad," she murmured sleepily, using the word for the first time. Mitchell felt his heart expand in his chest. "Good night, my daughter," he replied, kissing her forehead. Later, sitting in his office, Mitchell transferred the day's photos to his computer. Each image told a story, the story of a reconnected father and daughter, building a new beginning. The last photo, the one from sunset, he printed and placed in a frame next to the picture of Elena, father and daughter looking at each other, with the golden sky in the background. It was more than a photo. It was a promise that the past, with all its pain and loss, would not define their future. That the truth, however hard to confront, had the power not only to reveal, but also to unite. Mitchell looked at the two images side by side, Elena in a moment frozen in time, and Sadi, the living continuation of that love. Different, yet connected by an invisible thread that not even time or distance could break. The truth had finally come to light, and that truth, instead of destroying, had created something new and precious. A family. Imperfect, perhaps. Marked by loss, certainly, but real and alive, and above all, united by something stronger than the past, the possibility of a future together. The day had been perfect. After the trip to the amusement park, Mitchell and Sadi spent the afternoon at the movies watching an animated film. She laughed so much during the show that Mitchell found himself watching her face more than the screen. Each laugh, each expression of surprise or delight, was a treasure he greedily stored away. "That was the best day ever," Sadi declared as they drove home, the sky already tinged with the colors of dusk. "Really?" Mitchell asked, looking at her in the rearview mirror. She nodded with conviction. "Ever?" Mitchell smiled. In the past few weeks, since he had revealed the truth to Sadi, something had changed between them. The connection that already existed had deepened, as if the word Dad had opened a door that was previously only ajar. Sadi now talked more about Eleanor, sharing small memories she kept of her mother, the way she sang before bed, how she made different voices for each character in the stories, how she always found time to draw with her, even after exhausting days of work. Each memory was a gift to Mitchell, a piece of the puzzle of the lost years. As the car approached the entrance to his property, Mitchell noticed a vehicle parked across the street, a silver Bentley he would recognize anywhere. His body tensed instinctively. They hadn't spoken since the confrontation 3 weeks ago. What was his mother doing here? As he turned into the driveway, he saw Margaret Kane standing by the gate. Even from a distance, he could see something different in her posture. Her shoulders slumped, her head slightly bowed, none of the usual haughtiness. "Who's that lady?" Sadi asked, craning her neck to get a better look. Mitchell hesitated for a moment. "That's my mother." "Your grandmother?" Sadi's eyes widened. "I have a grandmother." The surprise in her voice made Mitchell's heart ache. Of course, the idea of a grandmother would be new to her. Elena had no family, and until now, Sadi didn't know about her father's side of the family. "Yes," he replied, slowing down, "but we haven't talked much lately." "Why?" How could he explain? How could he tell a 5-year-old that her grandmother was the reason her mother disappeared? The reason she never knew her father until now? It's complicated, he said finally. Grown-ups sometimes disagree about important things. Sadi accepted the explanation, though her curious gaze remained fixed on the figure at the gate. Mitchell parked the car, his stomach in knots. He didn't want this confrontation. Not today, not after such a perfect day with Sadi, but he also knew he couldn't just ignore his mother's presence. "Wait here a moment, okay," he said to Sadi, unbuckling his seatbelt. She nodded, though her eyes were still glued to the window, watching the mysterious grandmother. Mitchell got out of the car and walked to the gate. As he got closer, he noticed more unusual details. His mother wasn't impeccably dressed as usual. Her hair, normally perfectly styled, looked slightly disheveled, and there was something in her eyes, something he had never seen before. "Mother," he said, his voice neutral. "What are you doing here?" Margaret moistened her lips, a nervous gesture so atypical of her that it almost disconcerted him. "Mitchell, I came to ask for forgiveness. I can't erase what I did. But can I try to do things differently?" The words, so unexpected, left Mitchell speechless for a moment. In all his years, he had never heard his mother ask for forgiveness. Margaret Kane didn't apologize. She justified, explained, rationalized, but she never asked for forgiveness. "Why now?" he finally asked, his voice softer than he intended. Margaret looked past him, toward the car where Sadi was watching everything with curious eyes. "I haven't been able to sleep since you told me," she admitted. "I keep thinking about the girl. About Elena. About you. About what could have been." She paused, taking a deep breath. "About what I destroyed." Mitchell felt something tighten in his chest. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of an understanding. At that moment, he heard the car door open. Sadi, apparently tired of waiting, had decided to join the conversation. She approached cautiously, stopping beside Mitchell. "Hello," she said, with that mix of shyness and courage that was so her own. Margaret looked at her granddaughter for the first time, and something in her face changed. A softness that Mitchell had never seen before spread across her features. "Hello," she replied, her voice slightly trembling. Then, looking at Mitchell as if asking for permission, she asked, "May I meet my granddaughter?" Mitchell felt the conflict within him. Part of him wanted to protect Sadi, to keep her away from any influence that could hurt her. But another part recognized what he was seeing in his mother's face, genuine regret, perhaps for the first time in her life. He looked at Sadi, surprised to see her nodding, as if answering an unasked question. "Slowly," he said finally. "But yes." A visible relief washed over Margaret, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "Thank you," she murmured, and Mitchell realized she wasn't just thanking him. Sadi, with the natural curiosity of a child, took a step forward. "You look sad," she observed, looking at Margaret with those piercing eyes that so resembled Eleanor's. Margaret smiled faintly. "I am sad about many things I've done, but I'm happy to finally meet you." Sadi considered this for a moment. Then, in a gesture that surprised both Mitchell and Margaret, she extended her hand to her grandmother. "Do you want to come in? We made cookies yesterday. There are still some left." The simplicity of the offer, the implicit forgiveness in childish innocence, made something break inside Mitchell. It wasn't complete forgiveness. Some wounds would take time, maybe years, to fully heal. But it was a start. "I'd love that," Margaret replied, accepting the small, outstretched hand. The scene that followed would be etched in Mitchell's memory forever, Sadi between them, holding each of their hands as they walked into the house together. The girl chattered about their day at the park, about the movie they watched, about the cookies they had made. Margaret listened with genuine attention, answering the occasional questions with a gentleness Mitchell had never associated with her. As he watched the two interact, Mitchell felt a strange peace settle in his heart. It wasn't a perfect ending. Life rarely offered such things. It was an imperfect beginning, full of uncertainty and fragility. A new family was being born there, scarred, but also with room to flourish. Built not on expectations or obligations, but on conscious choices. The choice to forgive, even when difficult. The choice to start over, even when the past weighs heavily. The choice to love, even when fear whispers caution. Later, when Sadi was in bed and Margaret had left with the promise of returning the next day, Mitchell sat in the garden, looking at the stars dotting the night sky. "We're doing okay, Eleanor," he whispered to the sky. "It's not perfect. It's not always easy. But we're finding our way." A gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the trees, like a gentle sigh. Mitchell closed his eyes, allowing himself to imagine, just for a moment, that it was Elena responding from somewhere beyond the stars. Forgiveness and future. Two words that once seemed so distant, now intertwined in his life in ways he never imagined possible. The path ahead still had its shadows and uncertainties, but for the first time in a long time, Mitchell Kane felt truly at peace to move forward, with his daughter, with his past, with his future. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so